welcome. Thank you for joining our session today. My name is Cyrielle Simeon. I'm in product marketing at Databricks, so definitely not the mastermind behind Databricks SQL, but happy to have our Miranda from the product management team to tell you more about Databricks SQL and why at Databricks we think that the best data warehouse is a lakehouse. So here's how we're going to do this. This talk is actually divided in two parts. Part one is happening right now, and it's designed to level set everyone. So if you don't know about the product, this is perfect. We're going to cover a quick introduction on the origins of Databricks SQL, discuss some of the key benefits, and then I will hand over the mic to Miranda, who's going to dive a little bit deeper on some of the key capabilities. And then in the next session in this room at 3:30, the story will come to life with live demos. So stick around. We'll be here as well for questions between the sessions. So just before we get started, keep in mind that unless a feature is marked as generally available, things are still subject to change. And with that, let's kick things off. So I think it's pretty safe to assume that if there is one thing that is bringing us all here today, is that we all believe in the power of data and AI. And perhaps you're just getting started with your transformation, or maybe you're well along the way. But regardless where you are, I'm super happy that you were able to join us this week because you're definitely in the right place. And as you know, Databricks is known for having created lots of widely successful open source projects, starting with Apache Spark, the de facto engine for big data processing nowadays, Delta Lake for storage on the Lakehouse, and MLflow as a machine learning platform. And recently, we also made the news with Dolly, the world's first open source large language model for commercial applications. So we are the data and AI company. And in the past few years, thousands of organizations have trained their machine learning models on Databricks and using them to improve their businesses and disrupt entire industries and drive innovation. But as you all know, ChatGPT changed everything, accelerated everything. The sense of urgency to embrace LLMs from our customer and the market is huge. The number of conversations we're having every day with customers just skyrocketed, and we've seen an explosive growth of usage of Databricks ML platform for those use cases. And in our experience, as customers embark into this journey of data and AI transformation, one of the typical challenges we see is that two incompatible architectures get in the way. Most organizations have invested for many years in their data warehouse that are historically designed for organizing and analyzing structured data using SQL, analytics, and BI. The problem is that this 40-year-old technology isn't built for today's world. Data warehouses cannot keep up with the variety of data and use cases that you have to deal with today, like text, images, files, generative AI, LLMs, streaming, and so on. Not only the data is locked in on the data warehouse, but they're just not designed for handling unstructured data and AI. They're also very expensive to run, especially at scale, which cause additional challenges as the data volume continues to increase exponentially. So that's why in the past decade, organizations had to increasingly resort to the data lake, the more economical data lakes, to store large volume of data, unstructured data on cheap cloud object stores, and to better address their streaming needs and AI needs. And this pattern started way before LLMs became the new rage, by the way. So that's why thousands of organizations have adopted Databricks on top of their existing data lake for data science and machine learning use cases so far to complement their legacy data warehouse that were just built for BI and SQL. But these two different systems, data warehouses on one hand and data lake on the other hand, have created more complexity for customers. Now you need to keep data in sync between those two systems. There's more data movement, more data pipelines, more data duplication, fragmented governance, compliance risks, and so on to keep things working together. So a little bit of history. A few years ago, as we released Delta Lake, the open storage format layer for what we call now the Lakehouse, we saw more and more customers adopting us for their data warehousing workloads and SQL on the data lake, even though we did not position Databricks as a data warehouse at the time. When we asked them why, the answer was very clear and consistent. It was all about the power of unification, rationalization, and establishing one single source of truth for their data, structured and unstructured. And it far exceeded the gaps that we had at the time for data warehousing. So we set out and started to create the concept of the Lakehouse, the combination of data warehousing and data lake in one place, one data platform that can do it all, from looking at the past and historical data for BI and analytics to predicting the future using machine learning. And it's even more important today as we realize that to build the most relevant LLMs, you need to be able to feed the model the most relevant and most complete data, which include also historical data. So today, we want to tell you more about the resulting products, Databricks SQL. Databricks SQL is our serverless data warehouse on the Lakehouse. It's designed so you can run all of your SQL or BI workloads with up to 12 times better price performance at scale, a unified governance model, open formats and API, and your tools of choice. So there's no lock-in. You can just focus on the business. Thanks to serverless compute, you don't have to worry about the management of the compute resources. And it lets you easily ingest, query, transform your data in place using your favorite tools. So that's why, built on open standards, we believe the Lakehouse is the most open, simplified, multi-cloud architecture that can bring together the best of the data warehouses and the best of the data lakes in one place. And in fact, we've seen just exceptional and exponential growth of DB SQL since originally launched. We announced the GA less than 18 months ago. It's the fastest growing product line at Databricks, and we have many customers here this week that can tell you about their experience and are giving talks if you want to hear the benefits from them directly. So let's cover some of the fundamentals real quick. Databricks SQL is packed with thousands of optimizations to provide you with the best price performance for all queries, short queries, large queries, mixed workloads on real-world applications. As you heard from Reynolds this morning, that includes AI-driven optimizations for our MPP engine, Photon, and serverless SQL warehouse for instant elastic compute resource, which together give you the best price performance. In fact, 2 years ago, if you look at the left chart here, we set a new world record of the TPC-DS benchmark at 100 terabyte. This is an official audited benchmark. There is a link at the bottom if you want to read more about it and see the results. But we didn't stop there. As you can see on the chart on the right here, we can look at results for concurrency. And when we started this journey, we were not that great. Great at scale, concurrency was a little bit of our Achilles heel here. So as you can see on the chart, back in 2022, we actually started to, in 2021, we're on par with another leading cloud data warehouse. 2022, we got better. Nowadays, we have actually increased our concurrency performance by 4 times on this benchmark, for example. We have a dedicated session tomorrow at 2:30. Where you can see all of the latest benchmarks, TCO, performance features that I highly recommend if you want to learn more. Databricks SQL also stores and processes data using the open source format Delta Lake, which is based on Parquet. Delta Lake is crucial because that's the foundation of the Lakehouse. It solves the historical challenges that Data Lake have by providing a structured approach for ingesting, storing, and auto-optimizing the data. So that brings reliability, quality, and performance to the data lakes, which is really like the backbone of the Lakehouse here. It enables, for example, fine-grained governance and underpins Unity catalog. And like Ali shared this morning, I think you'll hear more about this tomorrow. It's also now the most versatile format since it's compatible with Iceberg and Hoodie as well, soon to be. You heard a lot about Unity catalog this morning. Obviously, Unity Catalog is our unified governance solution for data and AI. Obviously, it's fully integrated with Databricks SQL, so you can govern all of your data. Makes it super easy to discover, audit, govern the data using standard SQL, no matter where the data lives, thanks to Lakehouse Federation. We also have data sharing, automated lineage, role-based security policies, tags, central auditing capability, everything you would expect from a data warehouse, natively integrated on the solution. And last but not least, It lets you democratize AI thanks to native integrations with our world-class ML platform. You saw some examples this morning of how you can leverage out-of-the-box natural language interfaces to make it easier to find new insights and interact with the systems and the data that's stored in the system. It lets you provide data scientists a world-class platform so they can go and train models on your data, which is your competitive edge, and then pass over those models to analysts who can use them in SQL on Databricks SQL. So now everybody is empowered with AI to discover new insights. So that's why we don't view Databricks SQL as just another data warehouse. This is the next generation of data warehousing capabilities. And that's why we believe the best data warehouse is a Lakehouse. It's not only giving you the traditional data warehouse capabilities, but it's doing it faster, better, and cheaper. It allows you to establish one source of truth for all of your data, gives you world-class performance at the data lake economics, and runs all of your use cases, data analytics and AI, in one single place. And more importantly, we don't do this alone. We partner very closely with the most important players of the modern data stack, Fivetran, DBT, Tableau, Power BI, and so on, because we want to meet you where you are, and you can bring your favorite tools into the platform. So with that, I would love to invite Miranda to give you a deeper look into how Databricks SQL works.
Thank you, Cyril. Appreciate it. Quick show of hands. I know it's been a long day. Who's looked at Databricks SQL before, run a query, done something exciting? Love that. OK, great. Who's using Databricks SQL in production? Keep your hands up. OK, love that. And then how about who's already using Serverless? OK. Is it mostly regional availability? Yes. OK. That's fair. We are working on a number of different improvements in that area this year. So there will be a session later today where they cover kind of the full serverless roadmap, including a number of the different regions we're going to be coming online. How about Unity Catalog? Hands up if we're using DB SQL, serverless, Unity Catalog. OK, great. I love that. So we have a lot of good ground to cover today, a lot of exciting updates and kind of maturations of the product. I promise I'm going to leave a lot of time at the end for questions, because I know from years past that has been where we got a lot of the value out of this. And that'll let us poke at John in the next session to adjust his demo on the fly so that we can see exactly what we want to see. Cool. So just to start with kind of the level setting of what we all know, again, we kind of envision Databricks SQL to be kind of the best SQL experience when it comes to ingestion, transformation, querying, and analysis, as well as governance and management. And for a lot of you folks who have been using Databricks SQL in production, there are some areas where we've overemphasized in kind of our focus to date, and there are some where we're catching up, and some where we have some new and exciting announcements. So I'm going to jump into some of those. So first and foremost, blog went out this morning. Both streaming tables and materialized views are now in public preview, which is very, very exciting. With Databricks SQL, we always try to think, how do we give you options both within the kind of our own platform and also to allow you to use the ecosystem of other tools you're already kind of familiar with and invested in. But with streaming tables, we're really excited because this is going to basically be the way to think of streaming tables as the Databricks provided way for bringing data into your bronze layer. It's continuous scalable ingestion from any data source, whether that's cloud storage, Kinesis, Kafka, and Event Hub. And then we are computing the results over append-only streams. So what does that mean? It means we're only reading it once, and we're giving you automatic scale. Now, of course, if you are already using one of our ingestion partners like Fivetran, you are still in a very good place and going to be able to, oh, we're losing the slides again. OK. Well, so if you're already, we'll get that fixed. But if you're already using Fivetran, again, that's a partnership we're continuing to invest in more deeply. You'll continue to see kind of more turnkey features come online as well as performance improvements. And then the other exciting announcement that I have a pretty slide for, but I'll just tell you about, is materialized views is also now in public preview. So when you think about kind of the combination of capabilities that we want to make sure you all have at your fingertips when you are thinking about how do I use Databricks SQL in production, how do I leverage some of the platform tools, we always think about streaming tables and materialized views being used in conjunction. So streaming tables giving you that great way of actually landing data into the bronze layer, and then materialized views being kind of how we ensure that there's great performance in, go back for a sec. How there's great performance in BI dashboards, whether you're using Tableau, Power BI, ETL queries. So we really want to make sure that we're incrementally computing changes, so you're not, as you've probably experienced with some other systems in the past, kind of waiting for the spinner to go forever and ever and ever and ever, when you're really just bringing a little bit more data in each day, each hour, each minute, each second. So together, again, these two capabilities do a really, really important thing, right? They allow your data analysts, your SQL analysts, everybody who's operating in your data warehouse to have kind of that same power and ability at their fingertips that a data engineer does, without them having to think about, like, okay, what is incremental computation? How do I scale this pipeline when the data volume changes in this way? We want to give them the ability to kind of just self-serve with a simple SQL query, all in the documentation, create materialized view, create new streaming table as, and they're off and running. Now, of course, this is a key part of the Lakehouse. I'm going to zip through this slide because I know we're a little short on time today, but certainly when you think about kind of how all this comes in together, materialized views and streaming tables start by usually somebody writing a query in the SQL editor. Then you would go ahead and move on to making sure those are refreshed via DLT clusters. And then, of course, we're going to automate and orchestrate and monitor via workflows. And then everything is governed centrally via Unity. And then everything is stored in the data lake. Speaking of data transformation, of course, we also talk about offering a number of different capabilities out of the box, but we continue to invest with our partners. So we mentioned Fivetran already on the ingestion side. Certainly, our partnership with DBT is something we continue to invest in more and more each year. And that is also somewhere where, again, we want to make sure that those work with the platform capabilities like materialized views, like streaming tables. Workflows in Databricks SQL. How many folks kind of, before they started their Databricks SQL journey, started from, hey, we probably use some workflows, we use some interactive clusters, we're doing some fun stuff in notebooks, we're doing some transformations? Yeah, okay. So I'm sure you have kind of taken note, but now generally available, and I forgot to put the fun little ribbon. SQL tasks and workflows. So you now have a single way of orchestrating all of your work in the Lakehouse. Previously, I had a number of different requests. I see some familiar faces in the audience today, asking about how do I do a more granular schedule? How do I have this dashboard or this query refresh only after the data refreshes? How do I have some conditional retry if something fails? You get all that with workflows, right? So instead of us reinventing the wheel and kind of having two different ways for you to think about orchestration and manage it, we really embraced what exists in the Lakehouse already. And generally available now are SQL tasks within workflows. So you can use that today with any pro or serverless warehouse. And you can create multitask jobs, you can create complex schedules. And then certainly, the thing that's up next is, I'm sure, is not a surprise to anybody. But we are going to also make sure that it's not just kind of a one-direction integration, but we want that to be bi-directional. So SQL tasks and workflows are generally available today. But we are also going to make sure that when you're in the SQL interface, perhaps some of you kind of have certain user groups, you only give access to Databricks SQL, you don't set them loose on interactive clusters. We still want, when they create a schedule, for that to be a workflow that you can manage and monitor and audit the same way as everything else. It's okay. Awesome. Also leaning into the ecosystem, and there is going to be a great session on this from Adriana. I know some of you know her very well. Is the data consumption and ensuring that we can work with any tool, whether that is a BI tool. And there were some great advancements this year. I don't get to say like I announced it today, unfortunately, but there were some great advancements, particularly with Tableau, Power BI, and OAuth this year. We're going to continue to invest in making that kind of experience and that light up and the ability to kind of use use SQL warehouses with your favorite BI tool as seamless as possible, particularly for the group of users who doesn't want to go copy pat tokens back and forth and think about regenerating them, right? Like that, we hear you, that's been a friction. We're going to continue to work on that. And then certainly ensure you can still use your favorite SQL workbench, your favorite IDE, as well as building custom data apps, right? We talked a lot last year about, the Go and Node.js connectors, but certainly the REST execution API came online, I think, public preview between last Data and AI and now. And we've already started to see a number of different really interesting, really compelling use cases. So Adriana, in that session I've noted down at the bottom, is going to kind of walk through that whole ecosystem a little later tomorrow. Okay, before I jump into our integrated experiences and things like that, any questions, reactions to what I said already? I know kind of holding everything to the end can sometimes be a little boring, or we forget things. So anything so far? Okay, everybody's just super excited about it. Great, okay. Integrated analytical tooling. So a couple really exciting things coming here. So the SQL editor that we all know and love and use every day is here on the right-hand side. You know, the support for ANSI SQL coming online in addition to Spark SQL syntax was a big development over the past year. Certainly, we are always focused on kind of improving the experience for query authoring, and that not just is kind of like the Chrome of the editor itself or the object model, but also starting to integrate a SQL authoring assistant. So you'll notice there I asked a cute little question about how I would modify my query in order to, filter down to only certain types of orders. And the assistant came back and said, hey, this is kind of this is the query you would need to run in order to get that. It's a big investment area for us across the entire platform, similar to many other organizations, but we want to make sure that we're kind of moving in a direction of, kind of like Ali mentioned this morning, like English is the hottest new programming language. We don't want to miss that train. We're going to continue to make sure that's more and more integrated. And over time, you'll start to see visualizations and fun stuff like that too, right? So you won't have to have your SQL editor and like copy paste between the assist. Like we totally understand this is early days, but I would anticipate more and more of that becoming a lot more seamless as time goes on. And then of course, we continue to support visualizations, dashboards, alerts. We're doing a lot of fun stuff in that area, including the next thing, which I'm excited to talk about, which is what we're calling Dashboards vNext, or if some of you have chatted with me before, you probably heard me call it Lakeview, internal code name. We usually drop those once they're kind of more publicly available, but this is now actively in private preview. And in Lakeview, what we've tried to do is address a number of kind of the common asks that we get around dashboarding. Now, are we still amazing partners with Tableau, Power BI? Of course. We know that you guys have systems of record for dashboarding reporting. We're always going to support that. We're going to keep making the performance better. We're going to keep making the integration more tight. But we've also heard from you that sometimes it's really easy to just kind of have something integrated in the product where you don't have to set up an extract, you don't have to write a data model. Like, let me just quickly visualize a few things, do a quick prototype. And in doing that, we heard a number of kind of friction points that we wanted to address. So with Dashboards vNext, you'll start to see that come online. There were a few different pillars that we really wanted to invest in. First and foremost is on the simplicity and kind of the look and feel. The content models, the first thing I want to mention. Looking into the audience, I've heard a few of you ask me why you always have to kind of create queries, reference them, permission them separately, put different schedules, and jump through 95 hoops just to share a dashboard and have a co-editor. So now it's all packaged together. So if you share the dashboard to somebody with co-editing, then they're going to be able to edit the queries. They're going to be able to edit the visualizations. They're going to be able to edit the interactivity elements like filters and parameters. It's not something that you have to manage in 16 different places anymore, which we're really, really excited about. Second piece that goes along with the look and feel is more around the new visualization library. So heard from a few of you that some of our visualizations today are okay, but a lot of them look like they're from 1995, and that's all right. It was a good time. But now we are kind of embracing a new underpinning library, and also one that's going to allow us to bring additional capabilities online much more quickly. We've talked about cross-filtering. We've talked about custom palettes. We've talked about gradients. We're trying to bring all that out the door a lot more quickly, and by embracing this kind of new, more modern library, we're going to be able to deliver that a lot more quickly. The other piece under kind of the simplicity is a SQL optional UX. Now again, on day one, it's going to be super simple. It's find a table, pick it, and under the hood, we're doing a select star from that table for the user. But in the future, you can imagine that's going to get a lot more bells and whistles. I pick the table, how do I filter it a little bit? How do I pivot it a little bit? How do I do all this visually without having to kind of get into writing any SQL? Again, the LLM assistants are going to be integrated, so you could imagine just kind of creating the data set that you want to build your visualizations off of, persisting them without actually kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of selecting, limiting, grouping, and all that fun. Any questions on that before I get to, yes, go ahead. Yep. Absolutely, great question. So the question was around version control and promotion from like dev, test, staging, prod environments. Yes, that unified content model lets us do that a lot easier because we don't have any potential for circular references, which was one of the challenges we had with the old content model. So it's not there today, but it'll come online very, very quickly. We were reviewing some design docs this morning, so stay tuned in the next couple months, and it will be there integrated with repos. You'll be able to use it with any of your source control with Terraform. We'll be off and running.
I got one here.
Sorry? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
With this new library, are you going to be supporting extensions?
Not on day one, but ultimately we do want to think about that. And when you say extensions, are you doing some sort of fun GIFs, or are you going to do some custom plotlies? What do you think? Yeah. Custom lib, yeah. So I think what we'll probably start with is allowing kind of a path from a notebook where you import that library and just create the visualization to kind of bring that, that rendering layer in, but it won't be like import into the dashboard environment to start. But we'll get there. Yeah, we'll get there. Yeah, fair enough. Cool. Let me get through the next two things, and then I'm going to come to you next. Does that sound good? Okay, cool. So second piece, the second kind of pillar is not just simplicity in look and feel, but also distribution. We heard from a number of you kind of over the past couple years that, great, I can share this dashboard to someone who's in this workspace. Not everybody at my company who needs to see the dashboard is a Databricks user in this workspace, has data permissions, the whole 9 yards. So with this comes the capability to create a dashboard that can be accessed by anyone within your identity provider. And this is facilitated in conjunction with our friends on the identity side and the kind of unified login effort. So this will allow you to say, hey, I want to not just share this, but I want to publish it within the organization. I want to send this link out to other folks who may not be in Databricks, my leadership team, folks who maybe aren't in there thinking about SQL every day, and be off and running. And then the last pillar before I get to more questions is platform integration. That's something we're really, really leaning into with this new experience. We want to make sure that we're leveraging everything we get by virtue of being in a platform that has Unity Catalog. We've got all this great lineage. We don't want you to have to go to the Data Explorer and go to a tab and find this and find that. We want, when you view a dashboard, without having to understand all that detail, for you to know, can I trust this data? Has everything that happens upstream before I get to this final product, has everything been running the way it's supposed to? Super. If not, if I'm an author, what hasn't been? How do I go fix it? How do I repair it? So we want to make sure we're really leaning into things like that. And that includes repos and Git. Okay, there were some questions. Go ahead.
Hi.
Yeah.
Would there be a capability to share the report outside of the organization? I know we can do data sharing and share code and logic, but what about the UI?
Yep. Question, there was a microphone, but it was around sharing outside of the organization, so outside of the users within the identity provider potentially. Couple different ways of doing it. So first, certainly you can have guest users if you're in Azure AD and certain other identity providers, and that's something you can leverage early. Secondarily, we know you don't always want to add a ton of guest users, so we are looking at ways to kind of provide individual authentication mechanisms to external users, but that won't be there for the next couple of quarters.
So for the visualizations, are we able to import our own Tailwind CSS, have our own styles and stuff like that? Will that be a feature that you guys have?
It's something we're considering. It's not there just yet, but certainly allowing additional customization of things like the table, which we know are usually front and center, is definitely something we're thinking about.
So would you be allowing to write the custom measures or calculations on this dashboard, or it's just like the drag and drop, whatever the table is offering?
It's a good question. So the question was around custom dimensions and measures, and I assume some sort of kind of semantic layer and republishing those for publishing those for reuse by other folks in the future. That won't be there today, but that is something we're starting to kind of explore and understand a little bit more about. Of course, thinking of leaning into the Unity governance model and everything being kind of controlled under the same kind of paradigm there. So if you have more thoughts about that, we'd love to chat later. You go ahead, yeah.
Mine is related to semantic.
Okay.
If I have a customer that likes to do a lot of data modeling in Power BI, for now at least, what can I recommend to them to support that process as best as possible?
Yeah, so the kind of equivalent you're going to have right now is kind of creating gold tables. with potentially like different views, different time horizons, different aggregations. We do still support at the visualization layer applying different aggregations, different time bins, more and more different formatting, so that doesn't have to go into kind of any of the like the upstream layer. But until we kind of have something a little bit more advanced there, that's kind of the best path.
Got it.
Yeah.
And with the performance, like recommending like using Photon.
You get Photon by default in DB
That's just
SQL. Everybody
default.
gets Photon. You get Photon. Everybody's got Photon under their chair. Yeah. I like when I get to give good news.
So at the keynote, we talked a lot about Lakehouse AI, which is super exciting, especially for organizations who are starting to get into that space.
Yep.
Do we start to see some compatibility conversations with this new dashboarding model to be able to utilize Lakehouse AI to create these types of interfaces?
Yes, I think you'll see more and more of that over time. Like not today if you sign up for the preview, but absolutely. I think the whole company is kind of leaning into that framework and making sure it trickles through. So certainly you're going to see more and more, right? It won't just be, hey, this is like a frequently used table. It'll be, we recommend running this analysis because you just did this. Here's another visualization. Have you considered? Like more and more will start coming online. Okay, I'm going to do one more back there, and then we'll hit some of the other updates, and then I promise I'll pause again in like 2 minutes for more questions. Go ahead.
My question is not about dashboards. It's okay.
That's okay.
The assistant that you showed.
Yeah.
What's the corpus that it uses to show the suggestions? Because obviously it depends on how well people have written those queries. So.
Yes, depends on. So question is kind of the assistant. Is it perfect? Essentially, no, it's not perfect yet. It does learn. So let me go back actually really quickly. So I'm not sure if you can see. So there are a couple things. Yes, it does learn. One, there's kind of a thumbs up or thumbs down on results. So that is kind of one of the mechanisms to roll back. And I'll be super transparent. Like even pulling this screenshot, the first time I got this, the second time I got something where I was trying to mess around in the limit clause, which obviously we don't really need. I don't need a limit 10 right now. So it is learning. So I gave it some good feedback on like these, 3 responses were terrible, and then I didn't actually get it when I started to use it more and more often. So it will learn. It will also learn kind of what other queries have been run. Again, when we talk about leaning into Unity and understanding query history of other users that have actually been successful on the platform, that's going to make it a lot smarter, a lot more quickly. Okay, let me run forward on a couple things, and then I want to make sure we get to a lot of questions, and we are also going to have another Q&A slot after John's demos. So if I don't get to it in the next couple minutes, I promise I'll be hanging around here. Alex is here if you have more visualization questions. John will be here. Siriel will be here. So you have plenty of resources. Great. So one thing that we're going to go into a lot in another session is kind of the advancements we've made around the LLMs with SQL AI functions. So idea there is to kind of give you another option. I think, John, are you going to demo this? Yes, okay. So I will let him demo most of it, but the idea is to kind of leverage LLMs and some of these AI functions to just kind of very quickly get answers to some regular business English questions and to kind of make that a reusable capability for your SQL analysts, right? So I'll let John demo it. I know we're a little short on time. Python UDFs continue to be in private preview. Certainly encourage folks to kind of use those to capture any custom logic. We're seeing a lot of great examples of that, whether it's redaction, for example, of certain data. We're seeing really good usage of that for, hey, let me call a forecast function that takes into account XYZ. I do think that Python UDFs will also get a lot more love over time with some of the kind of integrations we're making with Lakehouse AI. Unity, we have a number of sessions on, so I'm going to skip ahead so we can get back to questions. Lakehouse Federation, you heard all about that in the keynote, but again, that's kind of us really leaning into with the Lakehouse, the ability to federate to a number of different sources securely using the same governance model that exists for everything within the Lakehouse. John has a great session about that right after the next one at 4:30. So if you want to really get into the nitty-gritty of that, I would encourage you to check that out. There is also a link there to the preview, so I want to make sure that everybody can kind of go ahead to that URL if you are interested in learning more. Intelligent workload management, so I talked a lot about kind of features, materialized view coming into public preview, streaming tables, dashboards vNext, integrated assistant. But I do also kind of want to point to a couple things that are always happening kind of under the hood. And Priyam has a session coming up on this again later today. But intelligent workload management is kind of something we're always working on under the hood to decide which query runs where and how and when and which one goes first. And we're always trying to make sure that we're doing this in an intelligent way so that you're not actually gummed down on anything. Concurrency just improves over time. Like you were all in the keynote, you heard, you heard Reynolds' anecdote about Usman thinking that something was broken because it was 50 times faster after an update. We're trying to always be surprising with those sorts of improvements, and just if you're watching kind of your query history for particular executions over time, you should see it just fly down over the course of 6 months, a year. Those are things we're always working on. And there are other capabilities too that you maybe interact with a little bit more intentionally, things like statement timeouts that are in this area. So I think I heard from a few of you that previously there were some concerns around someone inadvertently running a 3-day query, which is not always fun to pay for. So we introduced a kind of statement timeouts at both the workspace and the individual query level. So if you do know what you're doing and you want to exempt yourself from the workspace level limit, you can always do that. Query history and query profile both got a lot of love this year. So you're going to see more and more in this area. So live query profile came online so that you can kind of understand what's happening with the query execution as it's completing, as well as access all that information. And when I mentioned like seeing kind of performance improvement over time, leveraging query history API and soon system tables will allow you to do that in a much more turnkey way. And I will give a little heads up that there's going to be more query profile or Spark profile in a lot more places than just pieces of work that you run on SQL warehouses in the future, so keep your eye out for that. System tables. So we've promised you system tables, I think, now for a couple data and AI summits that I've been up here. But we are now in private preview. So highly, highly, highly encourage you to go to that URL and get yourself signed up for system tables. When you want to ask questions like how and when did this warehouse scale, who created it, who turned it off, I think I did get a couple engineering escalations this year around why did this warehouse change type. You would be able to answer that if you had this system table, and I wouldn't have to go look in our logs. So definitely encourage you to take a look there. And then also statement history, right? So I talked about, today we have a number of different customers, I'm sure some of you in the room, that are scraping the query history AI or API, creating a delta table from that, and then being able to analyze certain things over time. But we want to kind of give you that in a much more turnkey way, right? We don't want you to have to write and maintain a pipeline just to understand what actually was executed when. And then, of course, billing. We like to make sure that that's covered. And there will be a lot more kind of coverage on this in a future session.